Chapter 4. Oliver walks to London. Oliver took the high road. Though he was nearly 5 miles away from the town, he ran and hid behind the hedges by turns till noon, fearing that he might be pursued and overtaken. Then he sat down to rest by the side of the milestone, and he began to think, for the first time, where he had better go and try to live. The stone by which he was seated stated in large letters that it was 70 miles from the spot to London. London! That great place! Nobody, not even Mr. Bumble, could ever find him there. He had often heard the old men in the workhouse to say that a hard-working lad always has everything he needed in London, and that there was work in the vast city. He had reduced the distance between himself and London by 4 miles more, before he began to realize just what 70 miles really meant. Oliver walked 20 miles that day, and all that time tasted nothing but his one dried piece of bread. When the night came, he crept close under a haystack. He felt cold and stiff when he got up next morning, and so hungry that he spent his only money, 1 penny, for a small loaf of bread, in the very first village through which he passed. He had walked no more than 12 miles, when night closed in again. His feet were sore, and his legs so weak that they trembled beneath him. Early on the 7th morning after he'd left his native town, he sat down with bleeding feet and covered with dust upon a doorstep. Another boy about Oliver's age stopped to talk, greeting him by saying,
"Hello, my friend, what's up?"
The boy was one of the queerest-looking boys that Oliver had ever seen. He was a snub-nosed, flat-browed, common-faced boy enough, and as dirty as a young person as one would wish to see, but he had about him all the airs and manners of a man. He was short for his age, with rather bow legs and little sharp ugly eyes. He wore a man's coat which reached nearly to his heels. He had turned the cuffs back halfway up his arm to get his hands out of the sleeves, apparently in order to keep them in the pockets of his trousers, where they remained as he stood in front of Oliver. He was altogether as swaggering a young gentleman as ever stood 4 feet 6 inches tall. "I'm very hungry and tired," replied Oliver, the tears standing in his eyes as he spoke. "I have walked a long way. I have been walking these 7 days."
"Walking for 7 days?"
said the young gentleman.
"Oh, I see."
The young gentleman took him to a shop where he bought ham and a loaf of bread. He then took Oliver to one of the many public houses and led the way to the rear. Here they had their meal, the strange boy watching Oliver closely.
"Going to London?"
he said when Oliver finished eating. "Yes."
"Got any lodgings?"
"No."
"Money?"
"No," said Oliver. "Do you live in London?"
"Yes, I do, when I'm at home,"
replied the boy.
"I suppose you want some place to sleep tonight, don't you?"
"I do indeed," answered Oliver. "I have not slept under a roof since I left the country."
"Don't worry about that,"
said the young gentleman.
"I've got to be in London tonight, and I know a respectable old gentleman who lives there, who will give you lodgings for nothing."
This led to a more friendly and confidential talk, from which Oliver discovered that his friend's name was Jack Dawkins, and that he was a student of the elderly gentleman he had spoken about. Mr. Dawkins told Oliver that the old man called him
"The Artful Dodger."
They waited until night and then entered London, coming to the area around Islington. A dirtier or more wretched place Oliver had never seen. The streets were very narrow and muddy, and the air was wet with filthy smells. From several of the doorways, great ill-looking fellows were carefully emerging, going, it seemed, out on no innocent business. Oliver was just considering whether he hadn't better run away when the Dodger pushed open the door of a house, drawing him into the passage, and closed it behind them. Oliver, feeling his way with one hand and having the other firmly grasped by his companion, climbed with much difficulty the dark and broken stairs. Dodger threw open the door of a back room and drew Oliver in after him. The walls and ceiling of the room were perfectly black with age and dirt. In a frying pan, which was on the fire, some sausages were cooking, and standing over them was a very shrivelled old man. Seated round the table were 4 or 5 boys, none older than Dodger, smoking long pipes and drinking alcohol, acting for all the world like middle-aged men. These all crowded about their associate as he whispered a few words to the old man, and then turned round and grinned at Oliver. So did the old man himself, who the Dodger introduced as Fagin.
"We are very glad to see you, Oliver. Very,"
said Fagin.
"Dodger, take off the sausages and draw a tub near the fire for Oliver. Ah, you're staring at the pocket handkerchiefs, eh, my dear? There are a good many of them, aren't there? We've just looked them out, ready for the wash. That's all, Oliver. That's all. Ha 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 ha."
Oliver ate his share of the meal that was then served. After eating, Fagin gave him a glass of hot tea, telling him he must drink it off directly because another gentleman wanted the cup. Oliver did as he was asked. Immediately afterwards he felt himself gently lifted on to one of the sacks, and then he sank into a deep sleep.